A key concern of stakeholders in relation to, for example, a real estate transaction is typically you have a vendor, you have a purchaser. The vendor, in most circumstances, will have a bank. The purchaser, in most circumstances, will have a bank. The vendor, in most cases, will have a firm of lawyers acting for them. The purchaser will have a firm of lawyers acting for them. The real estate agent is the agent, maybe, in most cases, of the vendor, but the real estate agent can be also a buyer's agent. So in that situation, you have 6 entities involved in the transaction. 6 advisors, 6, some of them gatekeepers, some of them banks. And the legitimate concern raised by so many stakeholders was, please do not force Bank 1 to do the same anti-money laundering checks, Bank 2 for the purchaser to do the same checks, solicitors for the vendor to do the same checks, solicitors for the purchaser to do the same checks, for the real estate agent, the vendor's agent to do the same checks, and for the buyer's agent to do the same checks. That would just be lunacy. And there is an issue with respect to costs. There is an issue. It may well be, as Senator Whish-Wilson says, that the gatekeepers were aware of the cost implications for some time, but that doesn't address the issue of the cost implications. And there are substantial cost implications. And in my view, the government and AUSTRAC, and there have been positive signs, and I can say from interaction with a number of stakeholders, there has been some positive signs that AUSTRAC is looking at how to make this regime as user-friendly as possible and to minimise duplication. It would be madness that in a typical real estate transaction, as I outlined, that Bank 1 acting for the vendor has to go through these processes. The solicitors acting for the vendors have to go through these processes. The real estate agent acting for the vendors has to go through these processes. And exactly the same occurs on the purchaser side. And there were strong submissions made, including by the Real Estate Institute of Queensland in relation to the technology platform which is mobilised by PEXA and which accommodates the vast majority of conveyances that occur in this country on an electronic basis, and it's looking to increase the proportion of transactions covered from approximately 90% to 95%. There were very strong submissions made that when the guidelines have been issued, and we haven't seen the guidelines, we don't know what the guidelines are going to say, but there were strong submissions made that accommodation should be provided to leverage of technology to minimise the cost. So it's not a question of all or nothing, it's a question of leveraging technology to manage the cost, and so you don't have a situation where a politically exposed individual, perhaps from our Pacific region, and they exist, who has gone through AML checks at their bank, has to go through the same checks with their solicitor, the same checks with respect to their real estate agent, and that has to occur on both sides of the transaction. That would be madness. And I dearly hope when the guidelines are released that they demonstrate, AUSTRAC demonstrates that it has listened to the stakeholders in terms of their positive recommendations and suggestions as to how to minimise duplication, because we've seen that in New Zealand. In New Zealand, at the moment, there are 6,000 applications from small businesses to be exempted from the AML scheme in New Zealand. We should learn. One of the benefits, there is a benefit of the delay, is to learn from the experience of other jurisdictions. And we can do that. We can learn from the experience in New Zealand. We can learn from the experience in the United Kingdom. And we should do that. I proposed in my recommendations that there be more transparency around the production, the creation of the AML rules. these are the key rules that will apply to the gatekeeper professions. I would like to see that as a very public process, because I think we want to see in an open and transparent manner, and it doesn't have to be in the legislation. It doesn't have to be in the legislation. AUSTRAC could decide to do this, and I suggest to them that they do, that they publish exposure drafts of the guidelines, they publish submissions made by the gatekeepers and others impacted by these guidelines on those guidelines, and then they tell us how they get from those exposure drafts to the final guidelines. Because we will be watching. We will be watching. There are small businesses, potentially sole practitioners, who are out there trying to make ends meet, trying to provide a quality service to their clients, in particular in regional and country Australia. This will be an added burden. And again, that's indisputable. This will be an added burden. And we've got to make it as simple as possible for the relevant obligations to be met, especially by small business. And that is one of my primary concerns. The other issue I've got is, to be frank, is in relation to the application of suspicious matter reporting upon lawyers, upon the legal profession. And I have material issues with respect to the legal profession, lawyers as officers of the court, having to meet a suspicious matter reporting regime. In my view, and I say this as someone of the legal profession in a previous life, there is a real issue. There is a real issue in terms of lawyers managing their ethical obligations as officers of the court and also being subject to the regime under the legislation. And I haven't received any satisfactory answer to that. The Canadian Supreme Court was so concerned about it that they actually struck down the legislation in Canada as it applied to lawyers generally. That's a common law jurisdiction, similar traditions as we have in Australia with respect to legal profession. I note Senator Shoebridge's attempt to, with the benefit of the New South Wales Bar Association, to try and address the issue, but there are real ethical concerns, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if ultimately there is a High Court challenge to the application, in particular of those provisions, to lawyers. And there was enough evidence received by the committee, including from former High Court Justice Nettle, in relation to the issue, to cause some considerable concern that the suspicious matter reporting obligations being imposed upon the legal profession may well breach some constitutional provisions with respect to the separation of powers. And my last point I'll make in relation to this matter is, I would like to see more transparency in relation to the engagement between the government and also the Financial Action Task Force. I would like to know whether or not representations are being made to the Financial Action Task Force, whether or not there's a discussion at the Financial Action Task Force with respect to these legitimate issues around the cost implications for sole practitioners and micro small businesses, and also whether or not the legitimate concerns, especially of common law countries, with respect to their traditions in relation to the legal profession, the fact that members of the legal profession are officers of the court, whether or not those matters are being ventilated in those task force discussions. Because I'm not satisfied that they are, because there seems to be a lack of understanding in terms of the material which is produced by the Financial Action Task Force of that concern with respect to the competition, the conflict between lawyers' ethical obligations and also their obligations under AML regimes, in particular with respect to suspicious matter reporting. And from my perspective, there also doesn't seem to be sufficient acknowledgement in relation to the cost burden which is imposed upon micro, not even small businesses, micro sole practitioner businesses, be they accountants, lawyers or real estate agents. So with that, Deputy President. I will leave my comments there simply and perhaps simply note that due to an estimate spillover, I'll be unfortunately not be able to be here for what comes next, and I do wish I had the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Do you want Penny? Senator Kovacic.
Thank you, Deputy President. I rise today to speak on the Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorism Financing Amendment Bill 2024. Before I proceed, it is important to state on the record that the Coalition supports efforts to combat money laundering. In fact, we always have, and the AML-CTF Act is a Howard Government initiative post-September 11. This bill seeks to expand existing money laundering and counter-terrorism financing obligations to include Tranche 2 employees like accountants, real estate agents and lawyers. And as my colleague Senator Scarr noted, these are primarily small businesses, family businesses, organisations that don't have vast and deep resourcing. This bill is filled with inconsistencies and errors that need to be dealt with. There are legitimate concerns with respect to the regulatory cost burden of this bill, once again, which falls squarely at the feet of Australia's small businesses, and it is estimated to be some $13.9 billion over the next 10 years. There is no discussion of the details in the impact analysis released by the Attorney-General's Department. This cost burden is far too large for small businesses, which will subsequently need to pass their costs on to consumers. Hence, the government must seek to eliminate or reduce these costs. There are various impacts on the legal and accounting and real estate professions. Senator Scarr has outlined some of those in quite significant detail. The Law Council has been clear in their position that legal practitioners owe a paramount duty of care to their client and to the court. This bill drastically impinges upon a fundamental component of the legal system, which is the power of privileged information between a lawyer and their client. This bill would undermine this trust by legally compelling lawyers to inform their clients, eroding the foundational confidence clients place in their legal representatives. It is clear that legal practitioners should be excluded from the application of mandatory suspicious matter reporting requirements of this bill. Further, in relation to the real estate and accounting professions, the Real Estate Institute of Queensland recommended that there should be a platform solution which enables Tranche 2 entities to share and rely on information in the most effective way. And again, Senator Scarr spoke to this. There's multiple reporting obligations based on the current structure of this bill on one transaction. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. For an individual, a customer, a couple purchasing a home to have to meet these requirements 3 times in the purchase of a home. Once to their lawyers, once to their bank, and perhaps to their accountants if they're having some assistance in relation to that matter from them. Finally, there should be amendments to the explanatory memorandum to erase ambiguity about conjunction agreements and exclude residential site agreements and land leases. There are a number of deficiencies which were identified in the Senate inquiry, and I will go through those briefly. Noting the considerable concern with respect to cost and regulatory burden and how reforms would interact with professional responsibilities. It's disappointing that the processes for this hasn't been adequate. The Law Council of Australia has raised concerns with respect to the adequate time provided for it as the peak body representing the Australian legal profession to make submissions and engage in this process. Whilst there are circumstances where bills are required to be introduced and passed as a matter of urgency for reasons outside the control of the executive, this bill deals with matters which have been the subject of discussion for quite some time and should have been open to more broader consultation. In its additional comments, the Coalition has a number of recommendations, the first of which is that the Senate note the inappropriateness of the abbreviated timeline for consideration of the Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorism Financing Amendment Bill, particularly given the importance of the legislation, the cost burden of that same legislation and the failure of the government to circulate an exposure draft of the bill, and the inclusion in the bill of matters which were not subject to prior consultation, including the Schedule 9 powers. Concerns also were noted in respect to the regulatory cost, and I've noted some of those already, noting $13.9 billion in estimated regulatory costs of $13.9 billion over 10 years. There is no discussion of the qualifications contained in that report regarding that cost estimation. There is no discussion of the estimates of costs provided by the Tranche 2 entities, legal professionals, real estate agents and accountants, that were submitted as a part of this committee inquiry process, and that in itself is quite a staggering omission. The AGD impact analysis estimated that the upfront cost for the provision of legal services to comply with the new regime would be $429 million, with ongoing costs of $2.454 million. Over a 10-year period, that cost, calculated on a net present value upon those providing legal services, which are designated services, is estimated to be $2.833 billion. A significant impact on the industry and its many small business owners. There is also a cost impact on real estate agents, who are also primarily small businesses. The analysis estimated that the upfront cost for the provision of real estate services to comply with the new regime would be just under $1 billion at $989 million, with ongoing costs of $4.903 million. Over a 10-year period, that total cost, calculated on net present value basis upon those providing real estate services, which are designated services, is estimated to be $5.892 billion. Again, a significant impact on the real estate industry and its many small business owners. The impact analysis estimated that the upfront cost for the provision of accounting services to comply with the new regime would be some $562 million, with ongoing costs of $3.12 million. Over a 10-year period, that total cost, calculated on a net present value basis upon those providing accounting services, which are designated services, is estimated to be $3.682 billion. Again, a significant impact on the accounting industry and its many small and family business owners. The second recommendation from the Coalition on the inquiry was that before the bill is passed, the government must address the cost burden imposed by the legislation on small business. The $13.9 billion cost is a burden far too large, and these costs, as we know, will be passed on to families and customers. There are many issues relating to this, but in conclusion, this bill does not have the support of small businesses, real estate agents or lawyers, the very people it will burden the most. COSBOA has criticised the lack of consultation and warned that the cost, confusion and compliance headaches it will create. Evidence from overseas paints an even grimmer picture. This bill is fundamentally flawed and needs to go back to the drawing board, and we must ensure any reforms are practical, effective and fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kovacic. Minister Wong.
With the concurrence of the chamber, I move that the debate be now adjourned.
So the question is, the motion is moved by Minister Wong be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against, I believe the ayes have it. Minister Wong.
I thank the Senate. I move that the resumption of the debate be in order of the day for a later hour.
So the question is, the motion is moved by Senator Wong be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against, I believe the ayes have it.
Resolution agreed to earlier today relating to the hours of meeting and routine of business be amended as follows. Paragraph E, omit 5 p.m. and substitute 6:30 p.m. And I move that Senator Birmingham be given the call to make a statement without a question before the chair.
Thank you, Senator Wong. So the motion moved by Senator Wong be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against, I believe the ayes have it. Senator Birmingham.
Well, thank you, President. I thank you, Senator Wong, and I thank the Senate. President, this too shall pass. It's an ancient Persian proverb, the lesson being that through times of despair or elation, neither shall last forever. It is a keeper of perspective that I've found useful through the highs and lows of political travails. Now it is time for my parliamentary service to also pass. Some will be kind enough to be disappointed to see me go. Maybe only a rare few, but some. To them I am sorry, especially to those who feel that I am letting them or the team down at this time. Others, as is the nature of this business, will be delighted to see the back of me. To them I am also sorry. Sorry that I'm giving you this joy, but staying just to spite my opponents or to prove them wrong is no good reason to stay. In any event, it is always better to go when there are some wishing you to stay, and none of us is irreplaceable. Now is the right time for me, for my family, and for new career pathways. I'm excited that next year I will step into a new commercially oriented direction. You can all be relieved to know that it has nothing to do with lobbying, government relations or commentary. This year I hit the big 5-0. It provided cause for gratitude on the wonderful life I've been fortunate to craft and reflection on the priorities that lie ahead. There is so much in my life that I do have reason to be thankful for. Professionally, I will leave here just short of 18 remarkable years as a senator for the great state of South Australia. Perhaps it is best to get out before hitting 18 and reaching Senate adulthood, whatever that might look like. When I entered this chamber in May 2007, I was its youngest member at this time. I will leave, thankfully not as its oldest, but as the longest continuously serving of my current coalition colleagues. I've been fortunate to spend more time on the government benches than in opposition, to have had a near decade as a minister and the vast majority of it as a cabinet minister. For more than 4 years, I've had the honour of leading my party here in this Senate, serving as both Leader of the Government and Leader of the Opposition. I do know which one I preferred. I've seen, during those near 18 years, too many Prime Ministers and acknowledged the political blood on my own hands during those more turbulent times. I've worked at sufficiently close quarters, 2 PMs, to see the real and constant stresses of that job. I acknowledge all of those who have held our nation's most important office during my time in this parliament, from Prime Minister Howard all the way through to Prime Minister Albanese. I particularly thank the Liberal PMs in whose party room I served. John Howard was always generous with his time and advice, especially in my early years. Tony Abbott gave me the opportunities of serving on the front bench and through his win in 2013 in the ministry. Malcolm Turnbull promoted me to Cabinet, backed me in the pursuit of difficult reforms and brought me into his leadership group. And Scott Morrison was to challenge me with roles in the Expenditure Review Committee, the National Security Committee, the leadership of this chamber, and the joys of being a campaign spokesman through 2 elections. Politics, though, should never be about the titles you've held, but what you do with them. I hope to be judged to have left a positive legacy. As Education Minister, we cleaned up the rorted mess that was vet fee help and replaced it with a student support targeted to job-enabling skills with real limits on fees. In higher education, like many education ministers, parts of my agenda were foiled by this chamber. A key direction I sought to take, which I urge future ministers to revisit, was to create a performance element to university payments, linking some Commonwealth support to graduate employment outcomes. Supply-side decisions made by universities play a huge role in shaping the graduate mix across our country. It is in the interests of both students and the economy for unis to face both reputational and financial incentives to get the enrolment mix right. I had more success in abolishing the historic maze of multiple childcare payments, replacing them with a single childcare subsidy, targeting support to those working the hardest but earning the least. Means testing and activity testing, the CCS, were critical to maximise workforce participation and choice for families without breaking the budget. It would be fiscally reckless and of limited genuine benefit to abandon these limits. Simultaneously, we backed safety nets for early education and, to get more kids into preschool, began shifting state payments from ineffective enrolment-based payments to much more important attendance-based payments. But my biggest fight as Education Minister was, of course, over school funding. I inherited a wicked dilemma. On one side were reforms recommended to the Gillard government by the Gonski Review, which had been compromised via a big spending, no losers approach that, instead of Gonski funding, maintained 28 different funding deals for schools. On the other side were budget repair initiatives of the Abbott government that sought to strip away the big spending but had no chance of passing the Senate and also maintained funding inequities. After many conversations with the ever-thoughtful David Gonski and with the unwavering backing of Malcolm Turnbull, we determined that the only way out of the dilemma was a principled implementation of the Gonski recommendations. Applying the principle of Gonski's funding formula meant having the courage to create losers as well as winners. Some of those who stood to lose fought hard, others played politics. That was their right, even if at times their positions betrayed their purported values. As I said at the time, to some controversy, there was an opponent or two who sold out their values for a few pieces of silver. But many education leaders, faith leaders and experts put principles first, even if it required a difficult transition for a few. Ultimately, we were to prevail, securing 10 crossbench votes at the time, and I noticed Rebecca Sharkey in the chamber, and Beck, you helped with getting those crossbench votes too. And we did so to put school funding on a more needs-based and more consistent footing, which enabled more choice for families of all means and greater support for those of most need. As the Grattan Institute's Peter Goss wrote at the time, this was a victory for the school children of Australia over politics. Also acknowledge Michael Chaney, who took on the task of overseeing the technical efficacy of the funding formulas, including improving measures of income. I take some pride in the fact that our changes are enduring, with the current government's school funding changes based entirely off of the model and formulas that we legislated. But we didn't stop with funding. Thanks to bipartisan support in my home state, we began the spread of an early years phonics-based reading check across Australia. I was pleasantly surprised when, at my 50th birthday bash in June, the musician turned up, introduced himself as a teacher in his day job, and told me that his principal had asked him to thank me for the phonics check. It's the last thing I was expecting at the start of my 50th. The Gonski 2.0 report, which looked at how record funding should optimally be applied for better outcomes, laid the foundations for these and other practical reforms. Its recommendations on developing basic skills, more effectively measuring student progress and recognising our best teachers deserve to be fully implemented. President, it was quite a change to move from the classrooms of the education portfolio to the entrepreneurs of the trade, tourism and investment portfolio. But I loved the transformative nature that each brings to our nation. Our government delivered the biggest ever expansion of preferential market access for Australian exporters, lifting the share of Australian exports with advantageous rights of entry into our export markets from 27% when elected to more than 80%. I was proud to oversee implementation of the CPTPP, to sign the Indonesia-Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, to finalise the Hong Kong FTA, the Pacific Agreement on closer economic relations with our Pacific Island family, and the landmark Digital Economy Agreement with Singapore, as well as launching negotiations for our eventual FTA with the United Kingdom. In particular, I take pride in having secured the 15-nation Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. RCEP created the world's largest trade bloc, encompassing around 30% of both global population and global GDP, and cementing Australia's place as an integrated economic partner with ASEAN and other major Asian economies. We also launched Australia's India Economic Strategy and led a delegation of more than 100 education, tourism, energy, resources and agribusiness leaders as part of the first Australia-India Business Exchange. However, my time as Trade Minister coincided with the beginning of a great crisis, the COVID-19 global pandemic, and a big warning: China's attempt at coercive trade sanctions. I will never forget Saturday, the 1st of February 2020. I was spending the morning at the Liberal pre-selection that brought Andrew McLaughlin to this place, while the family prepared to host Tilly's 9th birthday party that afternoon. Then came the message of a special National Security Committee meeting being called. This was bad news. First, I had to tell Courtney that I may not make the birthday party. But more seriously, I also knew what was coming. That was the meeting at which we determined to close Australia's borders to China. As Trade and Tourism Minister, this was a decision of such consequence for the stakeholders I represented. I challenged the health advice, but could ultimately see the wisdom in the precautions being taken. It was the first of so many monumental decisions to be taken. Further border closures, the JobKeeper program, standing up a government-run air freight coordination mechanism, actions to save tourism businesses, and just so many more through COVID. Our actions weren't perfect, nor in such unprecedented times was the information we had available to us to base those decisions on perfect. But on the whole, I am very confident that the Morrison government decisions saved many Australian lives and livelihoods. In the midst of this global crisis, the wolf warrior diplomacy being deployed at the time by the Chinese government suddenly struck numerous Australian export sectors. As I've said many times, Australians should be proud that our businesses, our economy and our nation withstood that attempted coercion. China's actions betrayed the commitments our countries had made to one another, and whatever differences our governments had, there was no justification for those trade sanctions. Incidentally, the WTO's multi-party interim arbitration agreement that we had negotiated with China due to US blockages, and did so with China and other parties, actually became useful leverage for the ultimate resolution of those disputes. President, China is a great power, but this was an abuse of power, as we sadly see the Chinese government deploy too often in their military actions and in other conduct that is increasing risk and instability in our world. We all wish to preserve peace and stability. That requires genuine deterrence and effective diplomacy. Shortly after becoming Finance Minister, Scott Morrison brought me into the early discussions among a very small group of NSC ministers about the possible acquisition of nuclear-powered submarine capabilities. As if the pandemic decisions hadn't been monumental enough, the birth of the AUKUS partnership involved the most consequential of national security decisions, arguably since the signing of the ANZUS Treaty. Subsequently, when we lost the election, I was to take on the Shadow Foreign Affairs portfolio, and in doing so have seen the most challenging of times emerge across the world. I salute the courageous Ukrainians, the determined Israelis. I pay tribute and acknowledge the tragedy of lives lost in the Palestinian territories, in Lebanon, and in so many other conflicts around the world, but particularly those that are being fuelled by the axis of Iran, North Korea, Russia, and all too much enabled by certain Chinese policies. President, at the time we embarked upon AUKUS, we also oversaw the unwinding of pandemic assistance, the beginning of post-pandemic budget repair, and an economy that drove unemployment to its lowest levels in my lifetime. I was also responsible as Finance Minister for working with Sex Discrimination Commissioner Kate Jenkins on delivery and initial implementation of the Set the Standard report. This was important work, and I value the contribution that I was able to make alongside colleagues across the chamber. But I do want to press that I do not accept the perceptions peddled by some in this building of it being a universally toxic workplace. There are many staff and members of Parliament of all political persuasions who not only work hard and achieve much, but they actually enjoy their time here too. They should be proud of their work, take pride in coming to work in this place, and, whilst we should never tolerate the type of behaviours that led to the Jenkins report, the whole should not have their experiences universally besmirched. President, after all those experiences, and indeed even before I was Trade Minister, I was and remain unashamedly a free trader. I do fear that the world is headed into an era where populism trumps good policy. Australia must protect our interests. As the two largest free trade blocs, RCEP and CPTPP, They must be protected and enhanced to ensure that a free and open Asia-Pacific region remains the world's economic growth engine. In doing so, that will be best for Australia's interests too. And in my new life, I look forward to advancing these interests and to helping to practically grow our trade and investment flows through our region. President, with that, we should also be clear. It's important to celebrate the profits of Australian companies, not undermine them. We should also acknowledge that Australia needs migration if we are to fund ambitions in sectors like defence and maintain essential services as our population ages. We should also be bold in the use of data to drive government efficiency and stare down the conspiracy theorists who jeopardise such productivity measures. And we should seek to unite Australians, not divide them. I remain proud of my small role in securing marriage equality in Australia, having been the first coalition frontbencher to publicly back marriage reform. The ultimate strength of the yes vote for marriage equality demonstrated that Australians overwhelmingly back concepts of equality and respect for each other, regardless of our differences. We must learn this lesson in all aspects of our work, but including in the pursuit of reconciliation with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians. We should strive to make Australians proud of having the oldest continuously living culture in the world, not ashamed due to disadvantage, nor resentful due to perceptions of special treatment. It's about achieving mutual respect and equality of opportunity for all. Those on the harder edges of the left and the right who seek to divide our country only make us weaker in our division. Little is gained by culture wars, politicians obsessing over what happens in private bedrooms or anyone seeking to override evidence-based medical practice. I am a proud Liberal of the John Stuart Mill tradition, preferring less government intervention in both our economy and personal lives. The global rise of populism and divisive tribalism, peddled by ideological extremes, troubles me. It risks social cohesion in countries like ours and jeopardises the economic well-being of countries like ours. I am confident that Australia is a country whose values sit towards the centre and that the parties of government forget that at their peril. President, this won't be universally agreed across the chamber, but in Peter Dutton I believe the Liberal Party has a leader who understands that. Peter and I certainly don't agree on everything, but Peter is grounded, thoroughly decent, and has a perspective in touch with many hard-working Australians. I am confident that he would be a strong and effective Prime Minister, and I wish Peter and the Coalition team nothing but success. Without preempting the decisions of our party room, I also note that my departure will likely see the first all-woman leadership across this Senate. Good luck to you, Michaelia. Thank you for being a loyal deputy and a good friend. And I guess good luck, Penny, in having Michaelia at the table with you. President, I have been fortunate to have had it all in many ways: career, family and a great life. And I owe thanks to many. My staff, of course. I've been blessed with amazing electorate staff, policy, parliamentary and media advisors. I could never hope to repay what they have collectively done for me. I hope they never forget that my achievements and those of our governments are their achievements too. Be they have been parliamentary staff, electorate staff, or any who have made a contribution. While many have come and gone in my office, and happily often gone on to bigger and better things, a few Prime Ministers seem to like to poach my press sex, we have also had remarkable stability. Loretta Sist and Anthony Buck Rogers, two of my first electorate staff employed all the way back in May 2007, remain part of the team all these years later. I could wax lyrical about the merits of so many staff, past and present, but I do want to single out two particularly for their loyalty and leadership, both known to, I think, the bulk of my colleagues. Loretta, my office manager for the entire journey, has underpinned the standards, ethics and culture of our office. She has become family to us and will forever be so. Rachel Thompson, not game to look at me, my one and only Chief of Staff ever since I first became a minister, is potentially the best networked person in this place. However, Rachel's vast network is genuinely one developed through diligence, professionalism, thoughtfulness, humility and generosity. Thank you to Marcus and Samantha for enabling Rach to give so much of herself to me. Truman was wrong when he quipped that if you want a friend in politics, buy a dog. I take away treasured friendships of current and former parliamentary colleagues. Far too many to name, and I will create offence by leaving some out, but I will single out John Gardner and Trudy, James Stevens and Alex, Maurice Payne, Christopher Pine and Carolyn, James McGrath, Scott Ryan and Helen, Jamie Briggs and Estee, Anne Ruston and Sean Edwards, and as I say, no doubt others. Relations across the aisle are essential too, especially here, where the Senate is ungovernable without a degree of trust between the leaders. Penny, thank you for our trusting working relationship. It's come a long way from our sparring over the Murray-Darling Basin in my early years here. You are a formidable opponent, a warrior for your cause, and with an intellect that justifies your success. The Murray-Darling too, incidentally, is a reform where achievements that have been made, world-leading in water recovery and reform, should not be undermined entirely by debate about what more may or may not need to be done. Holding the water portfolio, the Murray-Darling portfolio in my earliest days, is also where I got my first real taste of conflict with the Nats. Bridget, we've become near experts at managing such conflict, along with good mates, and I thank our coalition partners. That leaves family and friends. Today would have been my Nan, Madge Hurd's birthday. She was a huge influence on my life. I spoke about her in my first speech. I know that Mum, who's here today, and her sister Margaret join in taking some added meaning that on this anniversary I take my next step. Mum and Jim, Gay and Roger, Margaret and niece have all in different ways given Courtney and I the support to juggle crazy professional lives while giving our girls every opportunity possible, along with support further afield from my cousin Lauren. Fewer truer words have been written about raising children than the phrase, "it takes a village." In addition to family, our village is blessed with many treasured friends who have kept us grounded while giving more help than could ever be expected. In particular to Pricey, Don, Cooper and Ruby, along with Sash, Keno, Georgia and Harvey, thank you for being the best mates anyone could ask for. Many more fun times lie ahead. I told the Senate in my first speech that my partner, Courtney Morecambe, could be just as capable of standing here as me. Perhaps she should have been, although Courts has a typically direct answer when anyone has suggested it. She honestly replies, "I don't like people that much." At the time of that first speech, when I referenced Courtney, she was Chief of Staff to Adelaide's Lord Mayor, and I, of course, was a backbench senator. We quickly agreed that one of us in politics was enough, so Courtney returned to her professional services career. Somehow, that formula didn't last. One wedding, 2 children, and 13 years later, we were to find ourselves in the position of me being Australia's finance minister and Courtney back in politics, not at local government, but as Chief of Staff to the South Australian Premier, also in the midst of that same global pandemic. How we all survived the intensity and madness of it all may forever be one of life's mysteries. It's due, of course, to many of those family and friends I mentioned before. But as we now enter a time when neither of us shall be in politics, words are insufficient to express my love and gratitude to you, Courtney, and my thanks. You backed me through the toughest of times. You've always been my most important and forthright advisor. Sitting either side of you, Tilly and Amelia, you guys are our world. We love you enormously. Okay, stop crying, Mimi, because you're doing it to me. Tilly, your drive and determination will take you anywhere, and Mimi, your care and consideration will ensure you are always surrounded by love. As I farewell this place, I do have a few departing observations for the colleagues I leave behind. Some have been informed, sadly, by the last couple of days. Colleagues, it is not necessary to target one another and personalise debates to advance the issues important to you. It is not necessary to undermine the principles and practices of this Senate to advance the issues important to you. Every senator is accorded with remarkable privileges and a platform like no other in this nation to advance those issues important to you. Use those privileges, make the most of your platform, and you will be amazed at what you can achieve in this place without crossing the line. I acknowledge, of course, all of the Senate staff, as I do all across the Australian Public Service. Rosemary Huxtable, former Head of Finance, thank you for being here with me today. And also acknowledge Tony Cook and George Mina across education and trade as two amazing public servants among the many, many who I had the privilege of working with. Serving in this Senate is the honour of a lifetime. I was just the 89th South Australian to do so, and have served, if the maths is right, with 206 of the 647 Australians to have ever been a senator. We've seen a lot of turnover, Penny. Those of you who have the honour of continuing in this place carry a great responsibility. I wish you well. Do good. Make a positive difference. Thank you and farewell.
Senator Wong.
Thank you, President. Well, I rise on behalf of the government and of myself to acknowledge and thank Senator Birmingham for his service to the Senate, for his service to the great state of South Australia, and most importantly, his service to our nation. As Simon said, he's been a member of this place for some 17 years. He's had quite an extraordinary career. Obviously, the Murray-Darling Basin, which anyone who serves in that portfolio bears certain scars, and has had senior frontbench positions as Minister for Education and Training, Trade, etc., and Minister for Finance, and in this place, leadership roles across the board: Manager of Government Business, Deputy Leader of the Government, Leader of the Government, and Leader of the Opposition in the Senate. Quite a remarkable career. Senator Birmingham's political activism dates back, I think, probably around as far as mine, and we've had a similar, if opposite, sides career, both cutting our political teeth in Adelaide at the uni. We've clearly got different political ideologies. He once confessed to me that he joined the Liberal Party at a time where John Hewson was promoting Fight Back. So clearly we disagree often. But Simon Birmingham is always engaged respectfully. He is always engaged with integrity, and he is always engaged with a clear view for achieving something positive for our country. Senator Birmingham is a thoroughly decent person, and I want to thank him personally for his constructive engagement across the table in this place. In these last years, but over the last 17 years. Senator Birmingham has repeatedly demonstrated a commitment to rise above petty personal politics, and you saw that again today. He's shown, to me, a great deal of kindness at times. He may not remember this, but he was actually very kind to me after our 2019 election loss. Our children were both doing Mandarin at the same school, and he saw me outside and was very, very kind to me, and I've never forgotten that, because he could have just said, well, we won, or something like that. He's also shown grit. Well, I think he said that. You might, not at all. He's also shown grit Some might say he's been optimistically valiant in advocating a moderate, informed approach to key debates such as water, environment and climate. And he was a key advocate within his party and the community and this parliament to achieving marriage equality. And with his characteristic humility today, he spoke about his small part. But I was there, and he played more than a small part. I think in politics, you see a lot of people who there's a lot more spin than substance. Well, some might say in this building that's the norm. With Senator Birmingham, there's a lot more substance than spin. And unlike many in this building, he never promotes how good he is or tells people how smart he is. But he is a man of enormous competence and high intellect. I think in politics you learn from the people with whom you work, but you also learn from the people with whom you contest. And I can confess to the chamber that Simon Birmingham is much more patient than Penny Wong. He also is a man who keeps his perspective. I think that is the key to why Senator Birmingham remains calm. He keeps perspective in the moment, and it is one of the reasons he has been such a good leader in this place, and one of the reasons he was such an effective minister. We also have both learned things in the Pacific. We learnt the difference between kava in Vanuatu and sakau in FSM. Oh, Micmac's left. I was really making that joke for him. Oh dear. And I have to say, one of the things I learnt then about Senator Birmingham was this. Despite having partaken much more than he should have, than was advisable of the sakau, which is the kava of FSM, he nevertheless managed to deliver competent, clear speech, coherent speech, albeit very, very slowly. I think, as Senator Birmingham said, serving in this place is an extraordinary privilege. Serving as a minister is an extraordinary privilege. Serving in the cabinet of the country and as leader in this place is the honour of a lifetime. And I salute Senator Birmingham's career as a great contribution to the nation. Few Australians have the capacity and platform to contribute to public debate in the way all of us in here are able. And as Senator Birmingham described today briefly, it also brings great costs, most of all to those who we love. A lot of time away from home, anniversaries, birthdays and celebrations missed. I know, Courtney, Tilly and Amelia, you'll have, I'm sure, are looking forward to having a bit more time with your husband and dad, and I wish you all the best for that. So, on behalf of Labor senators and personally, I congratulate Senator Birmingham on his service in this place. I thank him for his friendship, and I wish him all the very best for what's next.
Just a moment, Senator Cash. I'm going to give myself the privilege of speaking next. Very short. Senator Birmingham, I first saw you as a member when I was a member of the Rudd government. It was my first estimates, and my colleagues warned me and said, watch him. He's clever and quick and has a huge intellect. Since then, most of my interactions with you have been in my role as President. I've found you to be a person of great integrity, trustworthy and honourable. Your contributions have often been sharp and witty. Sadly, in this role, I've never really been able to laugh at them, but I have found them witty. But for me, I've seen you at your best, your absolute best in my view, during condolence speeches, whether it be for the passing of a senator, a national disaster or something on a global scale. I've discovered in those moments that your compassion is deep, that it's heartfelt, and it's obviously and still is very real. May I wish you well and all the best in whatever you do next with your family and your daughters and in your new career. Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Senator Cash.
And thank you, Madam President. And I too rise on behalf of many Liberal colleagues today who unfortunately due to time will not be able to make a contribution to you, Simon, but on behalf of myself. I will start my speech, and Courtney will understand this, and Simon, you will, but I don't think anybody else in the chamber will. We'll always have the night markets in Taiwan. But as I said, I rise to pay tribute to my friend, colleague and our leader in this place, Simon Birmingham. And I do so, of course, with sadness, but more importantly, Simon, I do so with immense respect and admiration for what you have done and what you have achieved in this place. In fact, you'll recall that we came into this place at around the same time. You arrived here in a casual vacancy in 2007, and I was elected in the 2007 election. And I have to say, it has been a journey for you and I over almost now 18 years. And I think you and I have often remarked to each other, it still feels like quite literally that we arrived yesterday. And yes, you do still look as good as you did back then. You rose from the considered backbench senator you were back then to the top place in this job. And as Senator Wong has articulated, leader of the government in the Senate, what an honour it is to hold that position. I was also reflecting earlier today that it would not have been an easy task to take over as leader of the government in the Senate in 2020 from someone I think we all acknowledge was a formidable predecessor in Matthias Cormann. But very quickly, you brought your own personality and your own style to the role, and you were able very quickly to win the respect of your team. But more than that, and again has been articulated by both the President and Senator Wong, you in fact won the respect of everyone in this place. I have been honoured to serve as your deputy since you took over as our leader. Your collegiate attitude, intelligence and the ability to negotiate successful outcomes, both within our team and within this place, has quite frankly been second to none. Unlike myself, I've heard you sometimes described as quietly spoken. But that certainly does not mean that you have had any trouble getting people to listen to you. The intellect, thoughtfulness, decency, but more than that, good humour that you have always brought to the debate in this place will long be remembered. You have, without a doubt, a proud history of service that anyone who has served in this place would be proud themselves to hold. From backbencher to a parliamentary secretary and then on to an assistant minister before becoming the Minister for Education and Training in 2015. You went on to serve as the Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment and then, of course, a role you discharged so well, the Minister for Finance and Vice President of the Executive Council. As many of us in this place know, and who've had the honour of being a minister, as glamorous as the title may be, it is not easy. You always, however, appeared to be doing it effortlessly, always on top of the issue and of your brief. But I, along with others, know how much hard work, long hours and anguish you, and as you so rightly acknowledged, your team, put in to make it look that way. It is a credit to you, and I quite frankly have no idea how you do it, that you are never flustered. It is something I will need to learn from you, seriously. You always remain calm, note to self, and thoughtful, no matter what is thrown at you. And I'm sure that will be one of the great strengths that you take into your new role in the private sector. In your first speech, you said this: I come to this place looking for us to think big, for at least the next few moments, to lift up above the humdrum, the sledging and the cynicism of day-to-day retail politics, to instead recall what inspired all of us: a desire to make a difference, a positive contribution, one that improves the lives of those living today and those of generations to come. And I think on any analysis, you have continued to strive for all those ideals over your time in the Senate. You have been driven to make a difference and to improve the lives of your fellow Australians, and I think you have succeeded well and truly in doing that. Like all of us in this place, we are senators, and we know ultimately what our role is: to be a fierce advocate for the people of our state. In your case, South Australia. And I certainly know, as we sat around the cabinet table for, in fact, our entire time together, that you would always argue, as you should have, stridently and persuasively for South Australia and for South Australians. You will recall many a time that some of the things you argued in favour of were in direct competition with the interests of Western Australia. But we were always able to agree, to disagree, and remain friends afterwards. And that is why, or that is one of the reasons why you will leave this place today with the best wishes of everyone in the chamber. Simon, for anyone who has served in the Parliament, as you said, the greatest thing you can do is to leave at a time of your own choosing and on your own terms. And as we know, for so many, that is a rare thing in politics. But after almost 18 years in this place, you have absolutely earned the right to do that. As you have articulated, the service you have given to your nation, it did come at a cost that each one of us understands, but each one of us is also prepared to bear. But it is our family who bears the greatest costs. And as you said, you've spent large amounts of time away from your home and away from your family. And no doubt Courtney and your daughters Tilly and Amelia will be absolutely delighted to have you home on a slightly more permanent basis. So Simon, this is it. As you embark on the next chapter in your career and your life, on behalf of all of us, I really do wish you all the very best. I want to thank you for your service to the Liberal Party of Australia, to the Liberal Party of South Australia. You have been a loyal servant to each and have made your mark on this nation. You have a legacy and will be long remembered in this place. Good luck, my friend, with everything ahead of you. You're welcome back to visit us anytime.
Thank you, Senator Cash. Senator Hanson-Young.
Thank you. I will just give a short contribution because I'm sure Burmo's own colleagues really want to have an opportunity. I just want to say, being a fellow South Australian, what a wonderful time it has been to work in this place alongside Senator Birmingham. From his work on the Murray-Darling to marriage equality, and Penny is absolutely right, the role that Simon played in that debate very early on was pivotal, and I don't think we would have actually got what we needed without Burmo's dedication to that issue. Climate, of course, has always been something that Senator Birmingham has spoken passionately about, and I understand probably more passionately internally than we ever hear on the outside. But I also remember the tussle over the education policy when Senator Birmingham was Education Minister, and we had some interesting conversations at that time. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this, but I think we both wanted to take the Catholics down a notch. The respectful and considered approach that Simon has taken in this role, the integrity, the honesty, the ability to be a straight shooter. When he tells you what it is that's going to happen, what he thinks, it's always, he always follows through. You can take his word with absolute trust that it will be kept. I'll miss our chats Burmo as we fly home at the end of the weeks, about talking about and debriefing how things have gone. I will appreciate your counsel of how to deal with some of your pesky Nationals friends, and the counsel often about how to try and manage this place at times when things are really heated and people are very passionate. And as Michaelia said, you've always got a calm about you, and that calm isn't just reflected back in how you behave with your team. I see it reflected back with how we all then engage across the chamber, and I think that will be sorely missed. You've done a very good job, and I thank you for that. And I will also miss our annual fun on the dance floor at the media ball. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hanson-Young. Senator Mackenzie.
Thank you. I rise today to pay tribute to my friend, colleague and Leader of the Opposition in the Senate, Senator Birmingham, or as everybody who actually knows him calls him, Burmo. As Leader of the Nationals, the second party of the coalition in the Senate, I want to express my warmest appreciation to Burmo and my genuine sadness about the prospect of his departure from this place. But I also want to express my admiration for your energy, your enthusiasm, the wisdom in choosing the time of your departure. Not many people get to do that, and that again I think goes to your intellect and your desire to continually want to make a difference for the people. As two people from the opposite ends of the spectrum of the coalition, Burmo's the Liberal end and I'm absolutely on the National Party end of the coalition. We have, as he referenced in his opening remarks, been often at the two sides of the internal debates that have consumed the coalition in our time in politics. When I arrived in 2011, you were almost a veteran of 4 years. You were the Assistant Minister, our Shadow Minister for Environment. And I think one of our first, we sat on the Environment and Comms Committee together, and I had to text Ben Bartlett to see which was the big fight we had, but we did have a couple. One was on the REACH rule, about the ownership of media organisations, and the other was the Murray-Darling Basin. And we have sparred, as you've sparred with many of my colleagues over the years, about that particular issue. But whether it was the vexed position for the coalition on the Murray-Darling Basin, your dealings as leader to leader have always found you being a man of great honour and principle. Tough conversations have had to be had, leader to leader, requiring an understanding of each other's internal difficulties of having to manage principled, value-driven senators on both of our sides to make sure that our two great political traditions are respected within the functioning of the Senate, because the differences of the coalition are very easily exposed in the detail-driven chamber of the Senate. And so finding ways to get through that together to make sure that every member of our team is able to express their values, to find a solution that allows them to bring their constituents along and to actually respect their role as a senator, I think shows you as a very considered and pragmatic leader. I will miss you as the coalition campaign spokesperson. Everyone laughs, safe pair of hands. That's not easy to do, particularly in the heat of a campaign, and I will really miss that aspect. I also was your education chair during the tumultuous times of the Gonski Review, and am forever bonded to many members of your team, some of whom I had the privilege to employ as my own Chief of Staff and senior advisors in government. But what really drove that, Burmo, as a former teacher, I think, was your desire to get the right outcome for Australian students for the long term. And as difficult as that was, I think we eventually landed. I will miss your humour, your indulgence, which you do indulge, particularly Cashy and I in the leadership group, a lot. That's right. Yep. I'll miss your curiosity as we ponder how to solve particular tricky, vexed problems on a day-to-day. You have a real curious, open-minded way to try and solve problems, which I really love. And I will absolutely miss you at Christmas time, when you are always the worst dressed with the best joke. But it has been a great privilege to serve with you in the Senate, in the committees together. You were the senior one. Back then, backbench, you never got to ask a question in Senate estimates unless the Shadow Assistant Minister indulged you. To serve with you in ministry, in Cabinet, on ERC and in Prime Minister Morrison's Turnbull and now Peter Dutton's leadership team. And obviously, as Senate leaders, I think a testament to your strength as a minister is shown by Rosemary's attendance here today. That was a very difficult period, not just for government but for our nation through COVID, and you absolutely steered the ship. I think you display the very best qualities of a leader: patience, empathy. You're an amazing communicator, and you're a reformer. You understand that all of us only have this great opportunity for such a short period of time, and we've got to maximise the difference we can make in the roles we have, and you've done it in every single role of your career. So I'm absolutely confident that that commitment to making a difference, positive change, won't change despite you no longer being in this chamber. And I wish you and the family all the very best for the next chapter. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Mackenzie. Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, President. Will I rise to make a contribution about my friend and my colleague Simon Birmingham, but as Mac has said, he's just Burmo to us in here. Entering here in 2007, replacing the late Jeannie Ferris, was the start of a 17-year career which has been accomplished, distinguished and significant. 7 of those years as a cabinet minister in a coalition government, and there's no doubt that those 7 years allowed you to make your mark on this country, and you should go and leave this place knowing that you have made a significant contribution to our country. Whether that was as an education minister, and I think every education minister wears the scars of having held that role, as the Trade Minister, the Minister for Finance, and of course as the Shadow Minister for Foreign Affairs, but most importantly for us over the last 3 years, holding our team together in opposition as our leader in this place. You've done a phenomenal job. But behind the extensive resume that Burmo brings to this place, there is a man of real character. You're a true moderate. You are absolutely a true moderate and unwavering in your conviction for your beliefs. But moderate he may well be, he's also a team player. And I can remember many occasions, as we all can, whether that have been in leadership, whether it was sitting around the cabinet table, whether it was in the party room, Burma always put forward his views and his convictions in the strongest possible way. But if he was outnumbered by the majority, he would always accept the majority view, and then he would then go out in front of the cameras and fight the fight that wasn't necessarily the views that he'd been put forward behind closed doors, but because he's such a team player, he would often go and fight the fight that I know inside he wasn't necessarily wanting to fight at all. But as Bridget has said, there was no more obvious a place where the contests were robust in many, many occasions. But the relationship, I think, that is established by a respectful debate about differing opinions can actually lead to some of the greatest relationships that you can ever make in this place. And so there is nothing that I think demonstrates that more so than the relationship you have with the National Party that you have maintained, and how we managed to get to a consensus position once we've had our robust debates behind closed doors. But one of the things I think that everybody will remember Burmo for is he is the safest pair of hands in the media. And although I have to say his confidence has grown and grown and grown in his time in this place, because I do remember a certain press conference when he was first in this place where he failed to actually work out where the exit was, and then had to, after a fiery engagement with the press, found it a little difficult to get out of the room. But the unflappable Burmo we see today was actually forged on the altar of a very embarrassing moment. And you'll note that these days he advances every single one of his media outings. Beyond his talents in this place as being an amazing senator, he has also been an extraordinarily loyal friend to me and a reliable source of advice. In fact, Burmo and his then partner in crime at the time, Sean Edwards, are the very reason that I'm even here today. They managed to con me at a restaurant one night at dinner that they'd really love me to run for a casual vacancy. I wasn't going to win, they said to me. You're not going to win. We just need a really good field of candidates. So I put my hand up, and 12 years later I'm still here. So clearly that wasn't true. But the reality is that there are many ways that you can judge the character of a person. And one of the ones that I think is a really, really good judge of character is the loyalty of their staff. There is nobody in this place that has staff that have been more loyal to him than Burmo. And I acknowledge Loretta, who's here, a formidable force in her own right, but to Buck and of course to RT and the many others of your staff. Their loyalty to you is a demonstration of your respect and loyalty that you give to them. It works both ways, and so I think that is probably the greatest demonstration of the character of the person that is sitting before us today for the last time. But above all else, Burmo is a family man. And to Courtney, who is a political operative all in your own right, I acknowledge you and the sacrifice that you have made over the last, well, it was not quite 17 years, but all the time that you guys have been together, that Simon has been in this place. I'm not really sure that you've thought this through about having him home full time, but I wish you all the best with that. And to Tilly and Amelia, who have never really known their father to be, well, you've not known your father to be anything else but a person who is in this place. It's going to be a really interesting time for you to have Dad home a bit more often so he can pick you up from school. But to Amelia, I'll never forget your birthday on the 7th of September, because Dad promised me faithfully that he would be my sponsor to bring me into the chamber when I was sworn into this place. And at the very last minute he said, I'm terribly sorry, but you're about to be born. So instead of putting me in, he went home for your birth. So I think that probably shows that I reckon he might I reckon he might just be the family man that we all know him to be. To Diana, it's fantastic to see you here. There is always one face that you'll always find in a crowd when Burmo's doing anything, and that's yours. The support that you have given to Simon throughout his career is absolutely extraordinary, and I just wanted to acknowledge that as well. So I'm sure that much of your decision today has been on the basis that you have an amazing family and you want to spend more time today. But to us in here, but to me personally, you're not just a considered and steadfast politician. You're a great leader, you're a great orator, you're a deeply rational thinker, but above all else, you're somebody that cares about other people. And the care that you have shown your team since you've been the leader has been extraordinary. We will absolutely miss you. We'll miss your wise counsel. We'll miss your terrible Christmas jokes and your terrible Christmas outfits, as Macca just said. But I think everybody in this place, and certainly on behalf of South Australia, we wish you all the best for whatever it is that you're going to choose to do in the future, because I know whatever it is, they'll be lucky to have you and we'll sadly miss you.
Thanks, Senator Ruston. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to put a few comments on the records too, and I don't want to take time up from other of your colleagues who might want to speak, but I did want to associate myself with the other contributions made already. I think you can hear from the genuineness and some sadness from the contributions to seeing you go, just how highly regarded you are in this Senate and across the chamber more broadly. I thought it was a wonderful valedictory speech with lessons for all of us in there to think about. And the fact that we will all think about it is because we respect your views so much. It's obviously been an incredible career here, but I've learnt through painful reference to Section 44, there is life outside this place, and it's a great life. It's hard when you're in the hustle and bustle of politics to understand that, that there are more normal jobs, at times less demanding and less public and just as rewarding, and that I know from your service to the country that you will keep contributing to the fabric of our nation, I have no doubt. I took over from you as Minister for Finance at the change of government. And I know with the public service, I know Rosemary's here, or she was here earlier. I know they are, never reflect on previous occupants of the job, but it was clear through all of my dealings what a great department in good leadership and in safe hands it had been under your stewardship. And how highly regarded you were by that department. And I was the beneficiary of your hard work in that respect. I think in terms of contributions that you've been made tonight, I associate myself with them. I think the words intelligence, integrity, confidence, you can speak to you in confidence and have that confidence kept, and that isn't always the way, and it's a highly undervalued part of the jobs that we do. And so when you find that with someone, you treasure it. The calmness, and I must say that at different estimates I did try to ruffle that calmness unsuccessfully. I thought, what do you have to do to get under this guy's skin? I never ever got there. Fundamentally, an incredibly decent person, and I think if you can serve 17 years in this place, in public life, and have that all of those characteristics reflected in this chamber, you've done what many others haven't been able to achieve. We won't miss you as campaign spokesperson. We do see the opportunities there, I have to say. But we know that you will be watching the campaign. And I say all these nice things, and I know it won't reflect on you badly now because you're leaving, but you've never given up, that your Liberal cause. You are a fighter and a warrior for that. And, again, to balance that and your ability to be universally liked across this chamber is something that's hard to achieve as well. So I want to, I think your office, our dealings with them, again, are so high. It's one of the, I hear about it all the time in this parliament, that your office, the staff in your office, are highly regarded, and that reflects on your leadership as well. We do have a little thing in my office where if Burmo's on the floor, so am I. So we'll have to, we were always trying to just stay one step ahead of you. So we'll have to change that now to cash alert, I think, subject to those processes. But yes, Simon, I was sad to hear the news, but I completely understand that this is a good decision for you, for Courtney, for Tilly and Amelia. And I wish you all the best. It's been an honour and a privilege to serve alongside you, and I look forward to seeing what you achieve next. Thank you.
Yeah. Senator Waters.
President, look, I won't be very long. In my dealings with you, Senator Birmingham, as leader of our respective parties, just wanted to thank you for your decency. And I'm pretty sure that you won't miss us and possibly this place, but the chamber will be the poorer for your calm expertise and your shrewd operation. I've always appreciated your honesty, your sense of humour and your work ethic, and you've always been professional and courteous to me. I respect how you've conducted yourself in this place, and I think that's a strong compliment for anyone to leave this place. I particularly want to flag the sincerity with which you approach the beginning of the work on Set the Standard in this place and our dealings at that early stage. You were always very clear, very detailed, and you clearly wanted to help fix things, and I respect you for that, and I think that's been really valuable work. So Parliament needs more decent people, and I think your party will be the poorer for losing your leadership, but I wish you and your lovely family all the very best in future.
Thank you, Senator Wood. Senator Hume.
President, I am rising today in 4 capacities, Burmo. The first as a housemate. Now, I think this is the longest running House in the Parliament at this point in time. It's had a fair bit of tenure. I think I'm actually the most recent addition to that House. But everybody from Christopher Pyne, Maurice Payne, Michael Ronaldson, Robert Hill, oh my goodness, the list is going on. But right now, I speak on behalf of James Stevens, Angie Bell and David Coleman to say thank you very much to both you and Loretta, who has just walked out of the room, because she is the silent housemate, I think, that looked after us all. It is always a stress in this place, but coming home to friends, even though you're always the last to get home and always the first to leave in the morning, which speaks to your work ethic, does make a difference to the way we approach the rest of our time here. I also want to acknowledge the word that dare not speak its name, and that is your role as the leader of the Black Hand. The Black Hand obviously is the ultimate secret society here, but it is not just about the parliamentarians, it's also about our staff and our party members that believe, as do you, that the centre of politics is where the real gravitas and responsibility lie. I thank you very much for your leadership that you've shown in that space. As your leader here, not just to colleagues again, but particularly to staff, and I know that we've mentioned your staff before, but it's not just your staff, it is everyone else's staff around the building too. We look to your office for leadership and guidance, and the example that you set in your office is one that we like to replicate in our own. Your team is so loyal, they are extraordinarily high calibre, and they would walk through fire for you, and that's what we all want. Other than that, I want to just say thank you as a friend. You have been an extraordinary friend in this place, sometimes at a time when friends are hard to come by. So what the future holds for you is so exciting. We couldn't be more pleased for you. What you leave behind is a legacy of service to your country and a nation that has changed because of what you have done here. But what lies behind you and what lies ahead of you pales in comparison to what lies inside you. And a person, and particularly in a profession like this, that where a good heart is just as important as a level head, means so much to us all. So thank you very much for the service that you've shown here to all of us.
Yeah. Thank you. Senator McGrath.
Hi, Courtney. Yes. So I'm quite grumpy at the moment for a real change of circumstances there. To begin with, Simon is leaving, and secondly, he has made me cry. And I don't cry, but he's leaving, and I'm very annoyed about that because I've known this guy for over 30 years. In the Byzantine world of Liberal student politics, in the Adelaide Conference of 1994, Simon was leader of the moderates, boo hiss. Scott Ryan was there as leader of the Victorians, boo hiss. And I was there as a spear chucker with an unholy alliance between the Queenslanders and the New South Wales people, boo hiss. And it was a brilliant conference because no one got on, but 3 of us became really good friends. And it was Simon, and it was Scott and myself, and a 4th wheel joined our car, and that was Jamie Briggs in later years. And so with Simon leaving today, it's sort of the last one of that group leaving. So I just want to say to Simon, thank you for being a good friend. Thank you for putting up with my grumpiness, my crankiness, my surliness, the fact that, like Courtney, I actually don't like people, and but deep down I do like Simon, and I love Courtney, and I Simon's mum. I don't think I've ever met Simon's mum. But Simon also was a flatmate of mine back in Adelaide in the dying days of a previous Liberal administration in the 2000s, and he broke my shaving mug, and I've never forgiven him for that because I hold a grudge. But Simon, I'm so happy you're leaving this mad asylum and that you are going out into the real world and you're going to see the sun and the clouds and the birds and just general happiness. So good on you, and one day we will look to joining you in that happy place. But after we throw out Labor at the next election. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator McGrath. I think we're at the end of the contributions. So I will call the clerk. Yes. Well, actually, I had Senator McGrath on my list. Yes. Prepared as you are. I'll just call the clerk, Senator McGrath, just to start things again.
Government Business Orders of the Day number 15, Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorism Financing Amendment Bill 2024, resumption of second reading debate.
Senator McGrath.
Thank you. Well, this bill is a disgrace, ladies and gentlemen. This is an attack on every small business in Australia. If you run a small business, if you work in a small business, if you buy from a small business, if you walk past a small business, well, shame on you because you go into the small business and buy off them. But this bill, notwithstanding the fancy title, notwithstanding the nice big words and all the acronyms, this is an attack on every small business in Australia. And this government should be ashamed of itself for this war that it has declared upon small business. And why is small business important? Well, because it employs millions of Australians. Why is small business important? Because from every small business does come a medium business and a large business. And from every small business comes the tax revenue that is so important for the public services that help make this country a great place, but also to make sure that Australians have that quality of life that we should have in such a rich country. But of course, we've got a Labor Party in power who've never seen a business that they don't want to tax into the ground. And this is what this bill actually effectively is about. It is a de facto tax on every small business in Australia, and it is a full-on attack on every small business in Australia. Now, COSBOA, who are one of the great representative bodies of small business, have expressly noted that the Attorney-General's failure to follow best practice and said that the bill, and I quote, leaves the door open to cost confusion and compliance headaches to small businesses, end of quote. Now, why is that important? Because if you run a small business and if you own a small business, guess what? You're the Director of Finance, you're the Director of HR, you're the Director of Maintenance, you're the Director of Operations, you're the Director of Governance, because it's just you running that small business. There is no bureaucracy of people that you see in large businesses, that you actually see in the public sector, to help that person run their business. So when the Rhodes Scholars who sit around the cabinet table of this country, those Mensa Society members that are the Labor Party, come up with ideas like this, they fail to understand actually how small businesses operate, because they have no experience in small businesses, because they come from the unions. Remembering, like in the UK, we've got the House of Lords, but here in Australia, we've got the House of Union Barons, because every single Labor senator, thank you, Senator Geller, for laughing at that one. I've used it before, but it's a good one, an old one. They're all union officials, so they don't understand actually what makes small businesses run. And guess what makes small businesses run? It's the A word, aspiration. It's the D word. It's the dream. It's the dream that little business that you have, whether it's a cleaning business, whether it's the corner shop, whether it is someone who cuts keys, that is your income. That is your world. That is how you can feed your family and pay your bills and get on with life. And indeed, one day you might be able to open up another branch of your business. Maybe one day you can get a bigger shop. Maybe one day you can employ someone else. Maybe one day you can grow your business so it earns more money. Not because you want to go and live on a super yacht in the Mediterranean, but because you want a quality of life that comes with living in Australia. And that's what small business does for Australians. That's why it's the dream of so many Australians, and that's why this bill is a nightmare for small businesses. That's why this bill has the unintended consequences of once again making small business life tough for those people who want to own a business or run a business or use such a business. Now, the Real Estate Institute of Australia has referred to experiences in New Zealand where real estate agents over there have been slugged with additional costs between $30,000 and $60,000 in exchange for an unquantified public benefit. These aren't just numbers that someone's tippy-tapped into a calculator or put into their iPad. This is real money. This is going to hurt small businesses. And small businesses means it's going to hurt the owners of the small businesses. It's going to hurt Australians. So for the life of me, I do not understand why any political party or any political movement, or particularly any government, wishes to make it tougher for those Australians who run small businesses. Now, the Real Estate Institute of Queensland, in my home state, have also have significant concerns that the legislation is too complex and imposes a disproportionate burden on real estate agents and adds to the transactional costs of buying a house. So what we've got is a weird form of Santa Claus here at the moment. We've got the Prime Minister, he's heading off to the semi-retired Prime Minister, who's heading off to his nice retirement home. He thinks he's Santa Claus because we're going to get all these bills rushed through the Senate today. The Labor Party is sort of like those uni students who leave all their work till the last day and do an all-nighter. And they're going to rush all these bills through, and we're going to have the unintended consequences of the costs on small businesses, but it is also the red tape. So we're going to have a weird form of the Labor Party, think Prime Minister Albanese being Santa Claus, flying around Australia with the reindeers, sprinkling presents, but instead of sprinkling presents, they're sprinkling red tape everywhere on small businesses. Red tape that is actually going to suffocate the small businesses because of the burden it puts on them. So I refer you to my earlier comments. The small business owner is the director of operations. They're the director of governance, the director of finance, they're the director of taking out the rubbish in the mornings. They do everything. They open the door up, they close the door up, and when they go home, they then do more work. So who is going to have to deal with this? It is the small business owners. And guess what? They've got enough on their hands at the moment. They've got a cost of living crisis. Have you seen how much power costs? Like, I was crying before because Simon Birmingham's leaving the building. Well, I sort of told a fib. I actually cried 2 weeks ago because I got my power bill then. If you ever look at your power bill, if you don't cry when you get your power bill, then you are not a human being. Because, quite frankly, they are just exorbitant at the moment because of this Labor government and what they're doing. So we've got these poor small business owners who are trying to earn a buck, trying to employ people, trying to live the great Australian dream, and we've got the Christmas Grinches coming along trying to take it all away from them. But the Law Council of Australia has noted, and I do quote here, that the legal profession is already the most extensively regulated profession in Australia, and dual regulation of legal services remains an ongoing issue for the legal profession, not least because the increases in regulatory costs inevitably put upwards pressure on the cost of legal services. Well, see, I would file that quote under what bears get up into forests and the religion of the Bishop of Rome, because, quite frankly, Sherlock, of course costs are going to go up when governments put more burdens on small businesses. So what are these small businesses going to do? Are they going to be like a charity and go, oh look, I'll take on the burden of this small cost, and it means I won't have as much money to pay for my bills, for the mortgages. And remember, interest rates have gone up 12 times since the Labor Party have come to power. Or insurance has gone up, I think it's 16% since the Labor Party have come to power. What they will do is, they don't want to do this, they will have to pass their costs on to the consumers. So it is the Australians who are going to lose out because of this piece of legislation. It is the Australians who are going to cost more. So in question time over the past few weeks, it is clear that the Secretary-General of the Labor Party has briefed the Labor Cabinet on that there's a cost of living crisis out there and they should be doing something about it. So you're hearing the words cost of living, cost of living, cost of living, almost like one of those country auctions in terms of how many times cost of living has been said. But this is going to make it worse. So we've got the words of the Labor ministers saying, oh, we're going to do something about cost of living, it's terrible, because that they know it all, because Secretary-General of the Labor Party has briefed them on that. And yet we have a bill before us in this chamber which is actually going to is going to increase the cost of living on Australians. So, Merry Christmas, Australia. This is what you're getting from this Labor government. It's not the 12 days of Christmas, it's the 31 bills rammed through this Senate chamber a month before Christmas. Because this is the disrespect that the Labor Party, that the Labor government and their friends in the Greens, by the way, have for the Australian people. And I've said this before. Friends do not let their friends vote the Greens, and friends do not let their enemies preference the Greens, because you end up with legislation like this. So if you think this is bad, Australia, and you're thinking this bill with this very, very, very nice title, this sounds like an eminently sensible bill, Senator McGrath, why are you opposed to it? Well, I'm opposed to it because of the red tape, because of the cost of small business. This is just a foretaste of things to come should Labor and the Greens win the next election. This bill is, and Senator Hughes, it's an amuse-bouche, is that the correct pronunciation? When you go to fancy restaurants and they give you nice little bits of food, an amuse-bouche. This is what this bill is. It's not even the entree. It is an amuse-bouche in terms of what is coming towards Australians at the moment. It's just a little taster, and it is a bad taster. It is a gagger in terms of how bad the taste of this bill is going to be for the small business owners across the country. Now, next week I'm going to be travelling around Queensland, as is my wont, and I'm going to tell you what the people of Queensland are going to be saying is, why would the Senate do something like this? Why would the Labor Party do something like this? And I'm going to say to them in all my coffee catch-ups and all the pubs I go to, I'm going to say to them, it's because we've got a Labor government who do not understand what actually drives the economy. We've got a Labor government who are so detached from reality. It's not the Canberra bubble, it's the Canberra world that they're in. It's a bad TV series. It's something that you might see on Netflix that was produced by a uni student or something like that. This is how bad this government is. Canberra world. And the mob in Queensland, the people who voted for David Crucifulli on October 26 with that landslide win, they're going to go, what? We've got a government who's going to put more red tape on small business. We've got a government who's going to make small businesses hurt financially. This is some type of joke. But the sad thing is, Acting Deputy President, this is actually not a joke. It is sad. It is sad what this bill means for small businesses across Australia. It is sad what the other legislation that has been rammed through this parliament because of the preference deal between Labor and the Greens, of the impact that is going to have on small businesses. And on this side of the chamber, we will always stand for the small businesses in Australia. We will always stand for those who work in small businesses, whether they're employees or those who run the businesses, or whether they're shareholders, a family trust or whatever it is, because this is going to hurt small business. And when small business hurts, that means Australia hurts. And when Australia hurts, that means That's just not a good place to be, because government is supposed